Ambassador Corex of the Deathworld Alliance stood in his pristine office aboard the diplomatic vessel, gentle whisper, staring at the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The small package from Earth sat on his crystalline desk like a work of art, wrapped in what the humans called recycled paper, and tied with an actual organic fiber bow. The very concept made his 3 hearts flutter with joy. "Oh, how wonderfully primitive," he whispered to himself, his violet tentacles quivering with excitement. "They still use actual plant matter for decoration. How delightfully rustic." The accompanying note, written in the humans' charmingly direct style, read simply, "To our new friends in the Deathworld Alliance. A small token of Earth's friendship. May it bring you as much joy as it brings us. Best regards. The Terran Diplomatic Corps." Corex had spent the last 6 months negotiating humanity's entry into the Alliance, and frankly, he was impressed. Here was a species that had somehow survived on one of the most statistically dangerous planets in the known galaxy, yet they approached diplomacy with such gentle thoughtfulness. Earth's safety reports were absolutely terrifying to read, what with their weather systems and tectonic activity and predatory megafauna, but the humans themselves seemed so wonderfully civilized. They must have overcome their violent nature through sheer determination. Corex mused, carefully untying the bow with his finest manipulator appendage. What wisdom they must possess to have tamed such a hostile world. The package opened to reveal a small potted plant, no bigger than his primary communication device. It was green, naturally, as most chlorophyll-based lifeforms tended to be, with what appeared to be modified leaves that had somehow formed into small cup-like structures. The soil smelled rich and earthy, a scent that the Alliance safety protocols would normally classify as potentially hazardous organic compounds, but Corex found it oddly pleasant. "A Venus flytrap," he read from the enclosed care instructions. "Native to the wetlands of North and South Carolina. Requires bright light, distilled water and occasional feeding of small insects." How charming. The humans had sent him a plant that required care and attention, a living symbol of the nurturing relationship they hoped to build. And they had included detailed instructions, showing their consideration for his well-being. The fact that it required feeding was obviously some sort of fertilizer regimen, he assumed. Corex placed the plant on his desk where it could catch the artificial sunlight from his office's environmental systems. The little cup-shaped leaves seemed to glisten in the light, and he could swear they were almost watching him. "You are going to be the crown jewel of our diplomatic garden," he told the plant fondly. A living testament to the gentle nature of humanity, he immediately composed a response message to Earth, his excitement evident in every carefully chosen word. "The Deathworld Alliance gratefully acknowledges receipt of your thoughtful botanical gift. We are moved by this gesture of peaceful intent, and look forward to nurturing both this beautiful specimen and our growing friendship. Your consideration for our horticultural interests demonstrates the refined sensibilities we have come to expect from such a cultured species." As he sent the message, Corex couldn't help but smile with all 4 of his mouth sections. The humans had truly exceeded his expectations. What could possibly go wrong with such a delightful gift from such a thoughtful species? The Venus flytrap sat silently on his desk, its modified leaves twitching almost imperceptibly in the recycled air, waiting. 3 days later, the diplomatic gift arrived at Alliance headquarters on Sanctuary Prime, the most peaceful planet in the known galaxy. The world was so safe that its biggest predator was a fluffy creature called a snuggleworm, which was about as threatening as its name suggested, and spent most of its time apologizing for existing. Chief botanist Velma Springleaf practically bounced with excitement as she received the package in her laboratory. At 7 feet tall with delicate crystalline skin and flowers, literally growing from her shoulders, Velma was the Alliance's foremost expert on safe plant life, which meant everything in the galaxy except Earth flora. "Oh, my photosynthetic processes," she gasped, reading the accompanying documentation. A real Earth plant. A living specimen from the legendary Deathworld itself. Security Director Rex Ironshield stood nearby, his massive frame bristling with the kind of nervous energy that had kept him alive through exactly 0 combat situations. Rex was built like a tank, if tanks were made of chrome, and had anxiety disorders. "Are you absolutely certain this thing is safe?" Rex asked for the 14th time, his scanner devices beeping frantically as they analyzed the innocent-looking pot. "The readings are unusual. Rex darling, it's a plant." Velma laughed, her flower shoulders blooming brighter with amusement. "What's the worst it could do? Photosynthesize aggressively." She carefully lifted the Venus flytrap from its shipping container, marveling at the strange beauty of its modified leaves. "Look at these fascinating structures. They're almost like little mouths, aren't they? How adorable." As if on cue, a small maintenance fly that had somehow infiltrated the ultra-sterile facility buzzed lazily toward the plant. It was the kind of tiny, harmless insect that the Alliance's environmental systems usually filtered out, but occasionally one would slip through. "Oh look," Velma cooed, "a little visitor wants to say hello to our new friend." The fly landed delicately on the edge of one of the trap leaves. What happened next would go down in Alliance history as the incident that changed everything. The Venus flytrap's leaf snapped shut with a speed that defied several laws of physics as the Alliance understood them. The soft, wet sound of the trap closing was followed by an even more disturbing sound, the barely audible buzzing of the fly, now trapped inside what was clearly a biological prison. Velma's flower shoulders immediately wilted. Did just, sweet merciful void, Rex screamed, his chrome exterior flashing warning colors. "It's a carnivore. It's a flesh-eating monster plant." "That's impossible," Velma whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Plants don't eat moving things. They don't hunt, they don't trap." The Venus flytrap sat there innocently, its other traps wide open like tiny green mouths waiting for the next victim. The captured fly's struggles were growing weaker. Rex was already activating his emergency protocols, his built-in systems going haywire. "Code Orange. I repeat, Code Orange. We have a hostile biological entity in the botanical sector. This is not a drill." "But the humans said it was a friendship gift," Velma protested, though she was now backing away from the plant, as if it might leap from its pot and attack her ankles. "The humans live on a death world," Rex replied, his voice reaching frequencies that shattered two nearby test tubes. "Their idea of friendship probably involves surviving mutual combat." As alarms began wailing throughout the facility, Velma stared at the Venus flytrap with a mixture of horror and fascination. "It's digesting that fly, isn't it?" "I don't want to know," Rex said, already calling for backup. "I don't want to know. I don't want to think about it, and I definitely don't want to be in the same room as whatever the humans consider a small token of friendship." The Venus flytrap's trap slowly began to reopen, revealing the partially dissolved remains of its victim. That's when the real screaming started. Within 6 hours, news of the Terran biological weapon incident had spread through Alliance communication networks faster than a particularly aggressive space plague. The fact that it was actually just a houseplant having lunch was apparently irrelevant to the growing panic. Commander Zara Stormwind, the Alliance's chief military strategist, stood at the head of the emergency council table looking like she'd rather be fighting a fleet of armed battleships than dealing with whatever fresh hell humanity had unleashed upon them. Her silver exoskeleton was stress-clicking in patterns that roughly translated to "Why did I take this job?" in 17 different languages. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded either enlightenment or total psychological breakdown. "The humans sent us a plant that eats other living creatures. Technically, it's an insectivore." Velma offered weakly from her seat, her flower shoulders now permanently drooped in trauma. "It only eats small flying insects." "Only?" Rex's voice cracked like a pubescent adolescent. "Commander, this thing hunts. It has a mouth, multiple mouths. It sits there pretending to be innocent vegetation while plotting the demise of any creature foolish enough to trust it." Science Officer Blix Wonderbrain, whose species had evolved from particularly intelligent mushrooms, was frantically taking notes. "The predatory behavior suggests advanced tactical awareness. The camouflage capabilities indicate military-grade biological engineering. The humans have essentially gifted us a vegetative assassin." "It's 6 inches tall," Velma protested. "Size means nothing when you're dealing with apex predators," Commander Stormwind replied grimly. "Have we established a perimeter?" Rex nodded enthusiastically. "I've requisitioned the entire eastern wing of the botanical facility. The specimen is now contained in a Class 7 biohazard chamber with triple reinforced transparent aluminum barriers. I've also stationed a full security team at minimum safe distance." "What's minimum safe distance for a carnivorous plant?" Blix asked, still scribbling notes. "We're still calculating that," Rex admitted. "Current estimates range from 50 meters to evacuating the entire planet." Commander Stormwind's stress clicking intensified. "Have we consulted the galactic database of dangerous flora?" "That's the problem," Blix said, his mushroom cap trembling with barely contained horror. "Earth plants aren't in the database. Nothing from Earth is in the database. Their entire biosphere is classified as approach with extreme caution or preferably don't approach at all. So we have no idea what we're dealing with," the commander concluded. "Worse," Rex said, his chrome exterior now flashing warning colors in a pattern that roughly meant impending doom. "I've been reading the care instructions the humans provided. It says here that Venus flytraps are considered beginner plants suitable for children and amateur gardeners." The emergency council fell silent, Even the room's environmental system seemed to hush in response to this revelation. Children, Velma whispered. Human children keep these things as pets. What do human adults keep? Blix asked, though his voice suggested he didn't really want to know the answer. Commander Stormwind stood up slowly, her exoskeleton now clicking in what could only be described as funeral march tempo. I'm declaring a Level 2 diplomatic crisis. All non-essential personnel are to maintain at least 100 meters from the botanical facility. I want psychological counselors on standby for anyone who's had direct visual contact with the specimen, Commander Velma said hesitantly. Don't you think we might be overreacting just a tiny bit? Rex pulled up a holographic display showing the Venus flytrap sitting innocently in its super maximum security containment unit. Look at it, Velma. Just look at it. It's not moving. It's not making noise. It's just sitting there waiting. Waiting for what? What is it planning? As if responding to Rex's paranoid observations, the plant's trap slowly opened and closed in what was probably just a normal biological function but looked disturbingly like breathing. It's mocking us, Rex concluded with absolute certainty. It knows we're watching, and it's mocking us. I need a drink, Commander Stormwind announced. A very large drink. And then I need to compose a very carefully worded message to the Terran Diplomatic Corps asking them to please explain what exactly they think constitutes an appropriate friendship gift. Should we mention that our entire security staff now requires therapy? Blix asked. Let's start with the basics, the commander replied. Like asking them if they have any idea what they've done to us. The Venus flytrap continued its patient vigil, occasionally snapping at passing dust particles and causing nearby monitoring equipment to register seismic activity from the collective flinching of the observation team. 2 days after the botanical crisis declaration, Earth's response arrived in the most terrifyingly casual way possible. A single human aboard a small transport vessel, wearing what appeared to be dirt-stained work clothes, and carrying a battered toolbox that looked like it had survived several small wars. Dr. Bob Greenthumb stepped off his ship onto the pristine landing platform of Sanctuary Prime, and immediately began committing what the Alliance considered several minor crimes against public safety. He was chewing something called gum, which involved rhythmic jaw movements that Rex's security scanners interpreted as possible preparation for feeding behavior. He was also wearing actual soil under his fingernails, which set off every biological contamination alarm within a 50-meter radius. Morning, folks, Bob said cheerfully to the hazmat-suited reception committee. Heard y'all were having some trouble with a little Venus flytrap. Figured I'd pop over and take a look. Commander Stormwind, speaking through 3 layers of protective communication filters, tried to maintain diplomatic composure. Dr. Greenthumb, we appreciate Earth's prompt response to our emergency consultation request. However, we should inform you that the biological specimen has been classified as a Class 7 security threat, and is currently contained under maximum safety protocols. Bob blinked slowly, processing this information while continuing to work his jaw in that disturbing rhythmic pattern. You mean the little plant I sent over? The one that's about yay big? He held up his hands to indicate something roughly the size of a coffee mug. That biological weapon, yes, Rex confirmed from behind his reinforced protective barrier. We've had to evacuate 3 facility levels and bring in trauma counselors for affected personnel. Huh? Bob said, scratching his head with a finger that had actual dirt on it. Living dirt. From a planet where everything was apparently trying to kill everything else. Mind if I take a look at the little fella? The convoy that escorted Bob to the containment facility was perhaps the most over-engineered procession in galactic history. 24 security personnel in full protective gear, 4 mobile decontamination units, 6 emergency medical teams, and a military escort that would have been appropriate for transporting antimatter warheads. Bob whistled appreciatively as they walked. Y'all sure do take plant safety seriously around here. Back home, we just stick 'em on the windowsill and water 'em when we remember. This statement caused Velma to actually stumble. You mean humans keep multiple carnivorous plants in their living spaces, voluntarily? Oh sure, Bob replied conversationally. Got about 12 different varieties in my kitchen alone. The sundews are real pretty this time of year, and my pitcher plants just had babies. The convoy stopped moving entirely. Several security personnel had to sit down. Your kitchen, Commander Stormwind repeated slowly. You keep predatory flora in the area where you prepare food. Well, they help with the fruit fly problem, Bob explained reasonably. Natural pest control, you know, way better than those chemical sprays. By the time they reached the containment facility, Bob had casually mentioned that he also grew something called roses that were covered in thorns sharp enough to draw blood, and tomatoes that were technically nightshades, like deadly nightshade, but edible. Each revelation had required brief medical attention for various members of the escort team. The Class 7 biohazard containment chamber was an impressive sight, a room-sized transparent aluminum cube surrounded by sensor arrays, atmospheric processors, and enough warning signs to stock a medium-sized library. Inside, the Venus flytrap sat in its pot, looking exactly as innocent and terrifying as it had for the past week. "Oh, there's the little guy," Bob said fondly, walking right up to the containment barrier. "Looking good, buddy. Nice color, good trap formation. Somebody's been taking good care of you." The plant's traps opened and closed slightly, which Rex immediately interpreted as aggressive posturing in response to the presence of its handler. "Dr. Greenthumb," Commander Stormwind said carefully, "our botanical expert has observed what appears to be highly sophisticated predatory behavior. The specimen demonstrates hunting patterns, tactical patience, and what can only be described as killing efficiency." Bob looked at the plant, then at the assembled Alliance officials, then back at the plant. "You mean because it caught a fly?" "It murdered a fly," Rex corrected. "In cold blood. We have it on surveillance footage." "Well, yeah," Bob said. "That's what they do. That's literally their entire evolutionary niche. They catch bugs and digest them. How'd you think they got the name flytrap?" The silence that followed was the kind of deep, profound quiet that usually preceded either enlightenment or complete civilization collapse. "You're telling us," Velma said very slowly, "that the hunting behavior is intentional, that this creature evolved specifically to kill. About 100 million years ago, give or take," Bob confirmed. "Pretty clever adaptation, really. They live in nutrient-poor soil, so they supplement their diet by catching insects. Gets them the nitrogen they need to thrive." Bob reached into his toolbox and pulled out what appeared to be a small container. "Speaking of which, little guy's probably getting hungry. Been, what, a week since his last meal? Let me just, don't feed the monster," Rex screamed. But Bob had already opened the container and shaken out what appeared to be several small crickets. "Now, normally I'd just let him catch his own," Bob explained conversationally as he opened a small access panel that the Alliance engineers had never intended for use. "But seeing as how you've got him in this fancy setup, figured I'd bring takeout." He dropped a cricket directly into one of the Venus flytrap's open traps. The plant snapped shut with that same wet, decisive sound that had traumatized the facility's entire staff. The cricket's brief protests were clearly audible through the containment system's sensitive audio pickups. 3 Alliance officials fainted. 2 more required immediate medical attention for stress-induced system failures. Velma made a sound that her species typically reserved for witnessing the heat death of the universe. "Beautiful," Bob said admiringly. "Good strong closure, nice tight seal. That's a healthy plant right there." He turned to address the remaining conscious members of his audience. "So, what exactly seems to be the problem?" The question hung in the air like a particularly toxic cloud of existential dread. Commander Stormwind, who had witnessed 3 galactic wars and survived the great bureaucratic uprising of 2387, found herself struggling to formulate words that could adequately convey the scope of their collective horror. "Dr. Greenthumb," she began, her voice carrying the tremulous quality of someone trying to explain color to a blind person, "we are struggling to understand how your species could consider a carnivorous organism to be an appropriate diplomatic gift." Bob scratched his chin thoughtfully, leaving a small smudge of something that looked suspiciously like fertilizer. "Well, I mean, we figured you'd appreciate something low maintenance. Venus flytraps are pretty much beginner plants. You don't have to worry about overwatering, they handle their own pest control, and they're real forgiving if you forget about them for a while." "Beginner plants," Blix repeated faintly. His mushroom cap had developed what appeared to be stress spots. "You keep using that term. Could you perhaps elaborate on what constitutes an advanced plant in human cultivation?" "Oh sure," Bob said enthusiastically, clearly delighted to find someone interested in his hobby. "Well, there's your ghost peppers, for starters. Those beauties can literally cause chemical burns. Then you got your castor beans, which are gorgeous, but the seeds'll kill you dead if you're not careful. And don't get me started on my prize-winning oleander hedge. Every part of that plant is toxic enough to stop a horse's heart." The remaining conscious Alliance members exchanged looks that roughly translated to "sweet merciful void, we're all going to die." "You grow plants that can kill horses," Velma whispered, her flower shoulders now so wilted they were practically dragging on the floor. "Well, not on purpose," Bob clarified. "But yeah, oleander's nasty stuff. Pretty though, real pretty. Got these lovely pink flowers that'll brighten up any garden. Course you gotta keep 'em away from kids and pets and livestock and pretty much anything that might take a nibble." Rex, who had been taking notes on what he was now officially classifying as intelligence gathering on hostile flora, looked up from his datapad. Dr. Greenthumb, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most dangerous plant on your world, where would you rank the Venus flytrap? Bob considered this seriously. Oh, maybe a 2, 2.5 if you're real small and happen to be an insect. A 2, Commander Stormwind repeated slowly. This organism that has required us to evacuate 3 facility levels and implement planetary safety protocols rates a 2 on your danger scale. Yeah, they're pretty harmless. Bob confirmed. Heck, kids keep 'em as science projects. My neighbor's 8-year-old has been growing one for her school biology class. Little Susie loves watching it catch flies. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Blix's frantic note-taking and what might have been quiet sobbing from someone in the back of the group. What? Commander Stormwind asked with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb, would rate a 10 on your scale. Bob's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Oh, now that's a great question, probably the Australian stinging tree. That bad boy'll put you in the hospital for months just from touching it. The pain's supposed to be so bad that people have killed themselves rather than deal with it. Or maybe the manchineel tree. That one's fun. The sap'll blind you, the fruit'll kill you, and just standing under it in the rain can give you chemical burns. And these plants exist on your world naturally? Blix asked, though his voice suggested he was hoping for a negative answer. Oh yeah, nature's full of nasty surprises back home, Bob said cheerfully. Course, that's not even counting the stuff we've been breeding on purpose. Got some lovely hybrid roses that'll shred you like a cheese grater if you're not careful with them. Commander Stormwind felt something inside her break. Not physically, but spiritually. The kind of deep fundamental break that happens when you realize that everything you thought you knew about the universe is not just wrong, but catastrophically, dangerously wrong. Dr. Greenthumb, she said very carefully. When your species selected a plant to send as a diplomatic gift, you chose something from the safest end of your botanical spectrum. Well, sure, Bob replied, looking puzzled by the question. We figured you'd want to start with something easy. Build up your confidence before moving on to the more interesting stuff. More interesting stuff, Rex repeated in a voice that had gone completely flat. Oh yeah, I brought some catalogs if you're interested, Bob said, pulling a handful of glossy brochures from his toolbox. This one here's got some real beauties. Look at this datura, gorgeous trumpet flowers, but the whole plant's loaded with tropane alkaloids. And here's a nice ghost orchid, doesn't look like much, but it only grows on dead trees and smells like rotting flesh to attract carrion flies. He flipped through the pages with obvious pride. Oh, and this one's special. It's a carnivorous plant we've been working on hybridizing. Combines the trapping mechanism of a Venus flytrap with the size and appetite of a pitcher plant. We call it the Devil's Maw. Ain't she a beauty? The image showed what appeared to be a plant roughly the size of a small trash can, with gaping maws lined with what looked distinctly like teeth. You've been breeding them, Velma said faintly. You've been making them worse on purpose. Better, I'd say, Bob corrected. More efficient. Prettier colors too. This hybrid line produces flowers in 17 different shades of red. Commander Stormwind closed her eyes and tried to imagine explaining this to the High Council. How do you tell the governing body of the most peaceful alliance in galactic history that humanity's idea of a beginner-level friendship gift had required military intervention? Dr. Greenthumb, she said finally. I need to ask you something very important. When humans say they want to be friends with someone, does that typically involve exposing them to biological hazards? Bob looked genuinely confused. What biological hazards? It's just a little plant. It kills things, Rex pointed out. Well, yeah, but only bugs, Bob replied reasonably. And only little bugs at that. It's not like it's gonna hurt anybody important. The phrase anybody important would later be analyzed by Alliance xenopsychologists as a key insight into human psychology, specifically their casual dismissal of anything that couldn't pose a threat to a 200-pound apex predator. Are there? Commander Stormwind asked with the air of someone approaching the edge of a very high cliff. Any plants on your world that don't have some form of defensive or offensive capability? Bob thought about this seriously. Well, most grasses are pretty harmless. Unless you count the ones that cause allergic reactions. Or the ones with silica edges that can cut you. Or bamboo, which can grow fast enough to impale things if they're not careful. What about flowers? Velma asked desperately. Surely flowers are safe. Depends on the flower, Bob replied helpfully. Poppy's'll get you high, foxglove'll stop your heart, daffodils'll make you sick if you eat the bulbs, and don't even get me started on what happens if you smell too many jasmine blossoms in a closed space. Commander Stormwind opened her emergency communication channel to Alliance Command. This is Commander Stormwind requesting immediate consultation with the Xenopsychology Department, the Biological Warfare Division, and possibly the Department of Last Wills and Testaments, came the confused reply. We have a problem, she said, watching Bob cheerfully offer cricket treats to their maximum security biological threat. A very big problem. 3 weeks later, the Sanctuary Prime Botanical Facility had been transformed into what historians would later describe as the most over-engineered greenhouse in galactic history. The single Venus flytrap now resided in a climate-controlled biodome with its own dedicated atmospheric processing system, a full-time team of 12 specialists, and more security features than most planetary defense grids. The facility's official designation was the Terran Flora Observation and Containment Complex, though the staff had taken to calling it that place where we keep the thing that must not be named, or more simply, Bob's House of Horrors. Commander Stormwind stood in the observation deck, reviewing the monthly status reports while trying not to think about the implications of what she was reading. The Venus flytrap had successfully captured and digested 47 flies, 16 gnats, 3 moths, and something the entomology team had classified as an unidentified flying arthropod that we're pretending doesn't exist. Status report Rex, she said with the weary tone of someone who had aged several years in the past month. Rex approached with his usual collection of data pads, scanner readings, and what appeared to be stress-induced system malfunctions. The specimen remains contained, Commander. No escape attempts, no aggressive territorial expansion, no signs of intelligence gathering or strategic planning. That's because it's a plant, Rex. Velma said from her workstation, though her voice lacked its former confidence. She'd spent the past 3 weeks studying every piece of Earth botanical literature she could access, and the experience had fundamentally altered her understanding of what constituted safe vegetation. A carnivorous plant, Rex corrected. A predatory organism masquerading as decorative flora. It ate a gnat yesterday, Commander Stormwind said, reading from the incident report. This somehow required a full security briefing and 3 hours of psychological evaluation for the witness. Proper protocols must be maintained, Rex insisted, especially given what we now know about Earth's botanical arsenal. The revelation of humanity's casual relationship with weaponized plant life had led to what Alliance historians would later call the Great Botanical Re-Evaluation. Every garden, every decorative planter, every allegedly harmless bit of greenery in Alliance space was now viewed with deep suspicion. Several council members had gone so far as to remove all plants from their offices, preferring to work in sterile plant-free environments rather than risk exposure to potentially carnivorous vegetation. Commander, Blix said, approaching with his latest research findings, I've completed my analysis of the human botanical catalogs that Dr. Greenthumb provided. Do I want to know? Probably not, but you need to. Blix replied, his mushroom cap displaying stress patterns that had become depressingly familiar. According to my calculations, Earth is home to approximately 400,000 plant species. Of those, roughly 30% possess some form of chemical defense mechanism, 15% are equipped with physical defensive structures such as thorns or spines, and approximately 2% are actively carnivorous. Commander Stormwind did some quick mental math. That's 8,000 carnivorous plant species. 8,012, to be precise, Blix confirmed. And that's just the ones they've catalogued. Dr. Greenthumb mentioned that they discover new species regularly. New carnivorous species. Among others, yes. The observation deck fell silent except for the soft humming of environmental systems and what might have been quiet whimpering from the general direction of Rex's workstation. There's more, Blix continued, because apparently the universe had decided that Commander Stormwind hadn't suffered enough. I've been corresponding with Earth's botanical institutions. They've expressed great enthusiasm about our interest in their flora and have offered to send us what they call a starter collection of easy-to-grow varieties. Absolutely not, Commander Stormwind said immediately. The list includes something called a sensitive plant that responds to touch, a telegraph plant that moves without external stimuli, and several varieties of what they term living stones that camouflage themselves as rocks. Plants that pretend to be rocks, Rex repeated in a voice that had gone completely monotone. They have plants that engage in active deception. There's also something called a resurrection plant that can survive complete desiccation and return to life when watered. Blix added helpfully. They describe it as nearly indestructible. Commander Stormwind closed her eyes and tried to imagine a universe where plants stayed in their designated locations, minded their own business, and didn't plot the demise of flying insects. It was a beautiful universe. She missed it already. What's the political situation? She asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know. The High Council has voted to accept humanity into the Alliance, Velma reported. The deciding factor was apparently our desperate need for allies who can survive in environments that would kill the rest of us instantly. So we're officially allied with a species that considers carnivorous plants to be appropriate children's toys. That's the situation, yes. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Commander Stormwind accepted the transmission, and Bob Greenthumb's cheerful face appeared on the communication screen. "Hey there, Alliance folks," Bob said, waving from what appeared to be a greenhouse filled with enough botanical nightmares to fuel Rex's anxiety attacks for the next century. "Just wanted to check in and see how our little Venus flytrap is settling in." "Dr. Greenthumb," Commander Stormwind replied, with practiced diplomatic composure, "the specimen is adapting well to its new environment." "That's great to hear," Bob said, beaming with pride. "I was thinking, since you folks seem so interested in earth plants, maybe I could send over a few more varieties. Got some beautiful sundews that just came into bloom, and my pitcher plants are producing some real stunners this season." The observation deck's occupants exchanged glances that could have powered a small starship through sheer terror alone. "That's very generous of you, Dr. Greenthumb," Commander Stormwind said carefully. "But I think we should focus on fully understanding our current specimen before introducing additional variables to the situation." "Oh sure, makes sense," Bob agreed readily. "No rush at all. Though I gotta say, wait till you see what we're planning for next year's breeding season. We've got some hybrid projects that are gonna knock your socks off." "I'm sure they will," Commander Stormwind replied, though her tone suggested that getting her socks knocked off was precisely what she was trying to avoid. After the transmission ended, the observation deck remained silent for several minutes. Finally Rex spoke up. "Commander, I've been thinking about requesting a transfer." "Where to?" "Anywhere in the galaxy that doesn't have plants." Commander Stormwind looked down at the Venus flytrap and its elaborate containment system. The little plant sat peacefully in its pot, traps opening and closing in the gentle rhythm that had become oddly familiar over the past few weeks. It looked so innocent, so harmless, so completely unaware that it had single-handedly redefined the Alliance's understanding of interspecies diplomacy. "Rex," she said finally, "I don't think such a place exists." "Then I guess we're stuck with them." "I guess we are." The Venus flytrap caught another fly, and somewhere in the facility, an alarm went off to announce the successful completion of another predatory feeding event. The sound was immediately followed by the gentle whoosh of air recyclers working to maintain the sterile environment, the soft beeping of monitoring equipment, and the distant sound of someone scheduling another round of trauma counseling. In his greenhouse back on Earth, Bob Greenthumb hummed happily as he tended to his collection, blissfully unaware that his simple act of botanical friendship had fundamentally altered the political landscape of an entire galactic alliance. He paused to admire a particularly beautiful orchid that happened to be carnivorous, then made a note to ask the Alliance folks if they'd like to see his collection of plants that could survive in space. After all, they seemed like such nice people, and he had so much more to share. The Venus flytrap continued its patient vigil, occasionally snapping at flies and inadvertently causing minor diplomatic incidents across 3 star systems. It was by all human standards being an excellent plant. By Alliance standards, it was the most terrifying thing they'd ever encountered. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind was the uncomfortable realization that if this was what humans considered a beginner-level friendship gift, they were probably better off not finding out what they'd send to someone they actually wanted to impress.